Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts about the 40K universe. I am your host, Scourge, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue with part 2 of the Navigators series, so let's get into 40 facts about the Navigators. Navigators possess a number of special powers, which represent their respective lineage. The powers of the Navi Nobilite are little understood by any but the most esocentric of scholars, and the Navigators themselves, of course. A Navigator is a living window into the warp, a fact mercifully mitigated for his own soul's and sanity's sake by the effects of the Navigator gene that allows him to perceive the warp's mind-blasting truth in a unique way that allows his human mind to deal with it. Unlike most psychic powers, Navigators do not need to summon the energies of the warp, or use arcane psychic tools to activate their powers. Rather, their powers are a result of their innate connection to the warp and the legacy of their genes. The following are an assortment of some of the most common Navigators' powers, wielded by these sanctioned mutants in the Imperium. Aether Uldrums. A skilled Navigator can use this power to mark a point of calm in even the most horrific of warp storms. On a small scale, they can also use this ability to find a stillness in the Immaterial flowing around them that damps psychic powers and pushes demons back towards the edge of the dark pit from whence they came. Many Navigator houses teach their prodigy how to seek this calm in the warp, as it may be the only thing that stops the Navigator from being torn to shreds and their souls devoured by demons in case of a failure in the Geller Field. The Geller Field protects the starship and its occupants from the hostilities of the psychically reactive warp, as well as the predators, such as demons. Baleful Watcher. This power, sometimes called Baleful Watcher or Piercing Gaze, is a technique taught to Navigators to help them penetrate the thickness of the warp and find a safe path. When turned on into an individual, this power allows the Navigator to look past the facade of material reality, and thus exploiting the knowledge he gains from staring so deep into his foe's soul. A cloud in the warp. By understanding and perceiving the currents of the warp, the Navigator can hide his presence from those who use the Immaterial to detect him. While it does not in any way mask his presence in the material universe, it can hide him from detection by psychers and confused creatures whose essence and existence are linked to the warp, such as demons and other entities. As the Navigator grows in power, he will become harder to detect, as well as being able to mask others. Corrupting the flesh. A vile power that is generally only used by shrouded or renegade houses. Navigators can use this power to channel the corrupting powers of the warp and bathe their targets with this malignant power. This power not only inflicts excruciating pain, but it also can lead to spontaneous mutation or even death. However, the power is not without cost, as Navigators who make use of this power on a regular basis risk losing their grasp on reality. Disrupting the Immaterial. Navigators possess an almost innate sense of the warp. Through little understood methods of psychic manipulation, the Navigator is able to churn up the local areas of warp space, in essence creating something akin to a miniature warp storm in local space. This has an effect on void ships attempting to exit and enter the warp. Ships wishing to enter the warp will never need to travel out of the area of disturbance or risk damage. Those void ships wishing to exit the warp must do the same. Ebb and flow. Time can flow in a strange manner when traveling through the Immaterial, and over the years many Navigators have learned to move with the temporal unpredictability of the Immaterial that underlines reality. By unleashing a vision that strips away the facade of linear time before the attacker's eyes, the Navigator can slow an enemy to a crawl. Even if the power's effect is extraordinarily subtle, many have found it to be just enough to stay an assassin's blade by a few precious moments, to prevent a foe escaping the judgment of the Navis Nobilite. Evil Eye. On many worlds, three-eyed mutants who can peer into your soul are thought of as boogeymen to scare children into obedience, and people whisper that they are a tainted breed that can curse good emperor-fearing citizens with but a glance. These legends likely do not truly refer to navigators, but they do echo with the truth of a matter, as techniques exist that can cause a person to attract a malignant spirit to the warp, drawing hungry things to them and slowly siphoning away at their very minds and soul. The use of this power is reserved for the navigator's house's most loathed enemies. Eye of Oblivion. The navigator snaps open his warp eye and traces the vital lines that bind a creature's animated force to its mortal shell. By psychically striking these places with the utmost precision, the navigator could inflict harm on its target's very essence, and thus defeating foes that might otherwise be invulnerable. Foreshadowing. By using his third eye to filter small secrets from the near future, the navigator can choose to make slight adjustments to his actions to avoid harm and manipulate the course of events. Only if the navigator tries to dig too deep into the near future of the secrets does this power become so unpredictable that the navigator may become a victim to the warp of lies. Gaze into the abyss. This power allows a navigator to see a creature or object's reflection in the warp and learn things hidden from the real universe. This power is most useful in unmasking both psychers and demons, but has other applications such as reading psychic taints on objects and tracking powerful psychic entities. Held in my gaze. The unflinching third eye of a navigator's lock a creature into place with a gaze that pierces flesh and bone to see the immaterial essence of all things. Most commonly employed against psychers, this ability can be used to render them effectively powerless and prevent them from calling upon their abilities. It is also undeniably effective against creatures with a strong connection to the warp, such as demons, upon which it can have spectacular and devastating consequences. Immolate the Soul. Navigators have the ability to tap into the warp and bend it to their very will. Through their warp eye, by carefully channeling the powers of the raw immaterial, a navigator can cause flesh to blister or spontaneous combustion. It seems that the most corrupt a person is, the quicker and more savage the burning process during this power. It is power such as this that can cause the uneducated to rightfully fear the navigators, and cause him to go hunting for them as witches or sorcerers. The more pious members of the Navis Nobilite feel that this power has been bestowed upon them by the God Emperor himself, so that they may persecute his enemies with cleansing flames. And it is rumored that these pious members of the Navigator houses use this power to hunt down members of the Navis Nobilite. Inward view. There are many myths about the Navigator's third eye, its origins supposedly harking from the ancient past of old Earth itself. The Navis Nobilite knows that such stories are not wholly mythical, and that it is entirely possible to discover hidden knowledge and a degree of inner calm using the Navigator's own unique brand of introspective meditation. Many of the older, more cloistered members of the Navigator's dynasties spend prolonged periods in their reclusive chapels, meditating upon physical issues and psychological lore. Obliterating the immaterial wake. Using arcane knowledge of warp psychics, and even special techno-arcane devices, such as a ship's warp vanes, the navigator can influence tides in the warp and attempt to obliterate any trail left from this void ship's passing through the immaterial, even real space, making it difficult, if not impossible, to track. Using this ability is distracting and physically taxing, as the navigator risks unconsciousness and physical damage. Pass unscathed. Being so closely linked with the warp, it is no surprise that the navigators have developed techniques to avoid its corrupting influence on both themselves and those around them. With a great deal of effort, the navigator can slow the insidious effects of the warp for a short period of time, relying on his mental fortitude to touch the poison of chaos without being corrupted by it. Precognition. More senior navigators sometimes learn to use this power. This form of precognition is much more vague and difficult to interpret than attempting to read the future by gazing into the warp directly, but remains far safer. Refresh and revitalize. It takes stamina and fortitude to be able to sit at the navigator station day after day, making sure a void ship stays on course. Navigators can tap into the powers of their genetic heritage and offset fatigue and exhaustion, allowing for a longer vigil than normal. While this isn't the same as the Adeptus Astartes Catalospian node, it is relatively close in function, and does not impart any side effects on the Navigators. However, this power only postpones the fatigue. It does not erase it. Once the Navigator has the means, they must sleep or else they risk falling into a coma that can last for solar days. Scourge of the Red Tide. Through their understanding of the Immaterium, the Navigator calls upon the full fury of the warp and bring forth a scouring tide of warp energy that jets forth from their fully open third eye. Flesh is seared to the bone. The vital fluid boils away as the victim's soul is consumed in the attack. However, using this power can jeopardize the user as well. Consequently, it is generally only used as the last resort, as the powers of the warp comes flooding into real space, consuming all in its path. Seek the path. The Navigator uses his third eye to peer through the Immaterium around him, piercing the churning clouds of the warp to find the causeways of least resistance to his target and assessing the path of its reaction before it can even move to defend itself. In this way, the Navigator guides his own attacks to his destination while circumventing his foe's desperate attempt to defend. Stacking the deck. Navigators by their training are taught the basic of starship naval combat. Navigators also are able to perceive flickering shadows of possible future events. By peering into the stream of time and space and studying the currents of the warp, the Navigator can attempt to position his vessels for a better firing solution, angle it such a way that the ship's armor is able to better deflect an incoming attack, or even point the ship in the best direction for a tactical retreat. Stripping the husk. With this power, the Navigator is able to quickly snap open and close their third eye, unleashing a blast of energy that immediately shears flesh from bone. In a gruesome display, Navigators who utilize this power can reduce an opponent to a pile of steaming bones and quivering meat in a matter of moments. Stupefy the Soul. Some Navigators are able to moderately control the warp's energies that can spew forth from their warp eye. While most can kill with a look, other Navigators can stun their opponents. By only partially opening their third eye, the Navigator can shock the soul of the living creature. Sometimes, this merely stuns the opponent. Other times, when the Navigators may wish to push a bit further into the foe's mind, causing him to suffer fear and shock as the warp attacks both mind and spirit. This has added results of forcing the opponent into fleeing or suffering a complete mental breakdown, as his grip on reality shatters from the powers of the warp. The course untraveled. Time is not an arrow that flies straight and true, but rather a tangled web of moments and possibilities. The course untraveled power allows a Navigator to negotiate this web, stepping fractionally from one moment to another, and in the process altering the position in the physical world. The use of such powers is extremely dangerous, however, as the Navigator is not actually physically traveling in a place as if he were teleporting through the warp, but rather choosing an alternate future in which he wishes to inhabit. He risks both injury, madness, and in trying to step outside the flow of time, death. The Lidless Stare. If a Navigator opens his third warp eye, anyone gazing into its depths will witness the powers and mind-breaking unreality of the warp. In an instant, they witness the chaos boiling beneath the skin of existence, and for many, it is the last thing they ever see. Tides of time and space. By examining the flow of the warp around him, the Navigator can anticipate near-future actions and thus move outside the normal flow of casualties by choosing strands of reality and slipping between them. While this power can be of great benefit to the Navigator, it is also very dangerous, and should he lose control, the result can be disastrous for both him and anyone near him in the local space-time. Tracks in the stars. When a starship travels through either real space or the warp, it leaves a faint trail, the lingering shadows of the warp drive's emanation. Using this third eye, the Navigator can follow this trail across the stars. Visions of Hell. While many navigators simply focus on wreaking as much destruction as possible by revealing the warp to their foes with powers like Lidless Stare, some navigators prefer to act with much more subtlety and train themselves to cast projections of the true face of that hellish dimension, causing even the most stout-hearted of warriors to collapse to their knees and weep as their sanity unravels. Void Watcher. Using this power and gazing into the void while aboard a starship, the navigator can learn things about space in his immediate vicinity of his vessel. This can reveal hidden dangers such as mines, void creatures, or concealed ships, as well as more mundane perils like asteroids and debris. Warp Vigil. Navigators must be ever watchful of danger when guiding a vessel through the warp, and be capable of reacting at a moment's notice to a caprice of the shifting realm of chaos. On the battlefield, a navigator can turn this power to his advantage, reacting to strikes before they arrive, or even calling allies to move out of harm's way moments before an enemy can land a telling blow. And those were 40 facts about the navigator's powers. That was exhausting. I think that's the longest video that we've done in a really long time. Thank you guys for staying and listening to it. We're not done with the navigators. We're going to continue talking, so please subscribe to the channel to get part 2. Comment down below on what other topics you guys would like us to discuss about the Warhammer 40K universe. Maybe Black Crusades, since there might be something happening with Black Crusades, hint hint. But thank you guys so much for watching. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.